4 to the 5. What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to another episode. Today you tapped into the Real Go Getters channel, and today we're gonna go through and we're gonna read the first chapter out of the book that I wrote while I was incarcerated. This book is called More Than a Gangster, Memoirs of Self-Development. And this book I wrote after I had got paroled. So I went to see the parole board the first time. They sent me back for 2 years, came back 2 years, and they finally gave me parole. They gave me parole, and they gave me a 5-year tail to get out on. So knowing that I was about to get out, I went ahead and started compiling essays. I'd write essays on just different, topics and thoughts that I was having while I was in there. And I wanted to capture and bring it out to the real world, to the free world, so everybody can kind of get a good feeling, because I knew at that time I was pure and I was at one of my highest vibrations, because you got to think, for 11 and a half years in there, I wasn't smoking, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't caught up in the stresses of the world. I was just able to sit back and be a student and analyze and learn and just be receptive of the information I was getting. But the book is 81 pages, give or take a few pictures on the pages. So I'm inspired by Ralph Waldo Emerson, though. He's a writer out of the 1800s, and man, he's prolific. I'd read his stuff, and these light bulbs of light would pop on in my mind while I'd read his essays. And I'm a student of his, so therefore my book is a compilation of essays. But let's not waste no time. Let's get right into it. So this is just the preface before you actually get to the first chapter. But 22 years was the sentence I was given to be served in the Colorado Department of Corrections after accepting a deal of 18 to 25 years. At that time, I was only 21 years old. What stood before me was a reality of being in prison for longer than I had been alive, longer than I'd been on the earth. My mind didn't even know how to react to such a thing, or even compute the fact that I had 22 years to serve to the Department of Corrections, but I'm only 21 years old. I've only lived to be 21. You think out of the 21 years, how many years was I really an adult? How many years was I really responsible for myself? So, man, my mind was fucked up. Who wants to wake up to the reality for that extended amount of time? Like, every day you wake up, you realize, you've got to do 22 years in the Department of Corrections before you're going to be able to go back out to this world. And where I was at doing my county jail time, there was a big open window and you could see the downtown city. So constantly it's like I'm looking at the downtown city and I'm realizing to myself, like, damn, for 22 years, I ain't gonna be able to see that. I ain't gonna be able to partake in none of that. And, thoughts of suicide, breaking out, and everything else ran through my mind, but the time had to be done. There was no way around it. I had to stand up to the consequences of my actions. I had shot at 2 different men on 2 different occasions to please my pockets and desires. Now I had to answer for my actions, and I had to be held accountable. At the time of most people's life, turning 21 is a time of celebration, but for me, it was just a time to grow up quicker and to make sure that I made it home. Because I turned 21 in the county. It wasn't no going out to the bar, wasn't no getting lit, wasn't none of that stuff. At 21 years old, I was in the county cooking a spread at the microwave for my 21st birthday, holding on to these bars, looking out to this downtown city, and just thinking to myself, damn, like, shit, I done fucked up. But I always knew, even through the struggles, I had to make lemonade out of lemons. And this was a parable that my mother used to use, and I think she got it from her mom, my grandma. And, she always used to tell me, when times are hard and things are bad, you got to be able to make lemonade out of these lemons that life gives you. And it wasn't until I was 4 to 5 years into my sentence that I really started to wake up and realize how valuable that my time really was. I struggled through times of segregation, what people would call the hole, and many layers of peeling back my own demons to receive the blessings of the eyes to see that prison could be utilized and could be worked in my advantage. So once again, I had to peel back my own demons, push them away and get them off me in order to open up the blessing, to have the eyes to see that even though I'm in prison, even though I'm doing time, like, this time is my greatest asset. Like, it's the most valuable thing possible, and that it can be used to my advantage. And my eyes were open to that. And when it was open to that, prison became my own self-study. It became like a college to a degree. But, um, you know, with the help of my 30 minutes of allowed time to the penitentiary library, I started on a yearly self-challenge to self-educate and download every book to my brain that time would allow. And you get these little library passes, and you can go up in here for 30 minutes, and you can either grab a book or two or three, look at magazines. Sometimes you can even listen to some music. To me, I was going in there trying to knock these books out and make sure that I retained them. And one key factor when I read books in there is that I keep a journal on the side, and I would take notes, because I realized the power of being able to remember what you're reading by taking notes. You know what I mean? And man, I've got books on top of books and notes on top of notes, but I don't want to get too far off the book. But not just any book, but only the books that I knew would add value to my being and help me build greater understandings of the world at large. And I wasn't reading just like fiction books. I didn't want to read no horror books. I didn't want to read no true crime books. Nah, I knew enough of that already. And just being in the penitentiary and being in the day room, I mean, you want to hear enough stories for a lifetime, right? But that ended up being one of my greatest investments that I've ever made, and that investment was myself. What you are about to embark on are the essays that I wrote upon leaving prison, thoughts in my head that demanded to be on paper. I have built upon the building blocks that allowed for me to overcome many struggles in my life, in hopes of passing these on to others who may never have the luxury of being isolated to grow and have that development. What this book is the memoirs of that. When growing up as a child, you buy into many ideas and many views of life, which may be very destructive for your success in this lifetime, but who has the time to really sit down and thin slice their life to decode such things? I did. May you be blessed with the eyes to see and the ears to hear the wisdom that has been embedded in me. And this was written by me on 11/13/2016. I came home in 2014, 2016. I started putting this thing together and peeling it off all the regular pieces of paper that I had written on. Compiled all this with the help of my mom. She helped me line this stuff out, and she was the first reader of this book and gave me her feedback on it. But the next page goes on to have a poem. Now, this poem was written by a friend of mine at the time named David Tillery, and the poem goes on to say, young man, don't grow up too soon with that pistol in your hand and your eyes on the moon. Instead, shoot for the stars and not for prison bars. Listen for God's promises and not the devil's scars. Young man, you must honor thy mother and father and sister and brother, helping to keep your family. Please get out of the streets wasting your time trying to be a gangster and calling it a grind. Get out of that girl's bed and please think ahead. You're now killing her future with the lies that you said. Be a child of God and learn what that means. Study your history, young man. Now I dare you to dream. Pull up your pants and tuck in your shirt and watch your mouth at home, school, and work. For what it's worth, I didn't do none of these things. Now I'm doing time for what I thought was fame. I took life for granted as if someone owed me something. Now trapped in a cell, left with nothing. Take heed to the truth and learn these lessons. The streets will get you time, but God will give you blessings. Young man, please be patient. Get your life in order. God's plan is waiting on you. When praises go up, blessings come down. Separate your pride. On your knees, you shall bow. For this is a plea and a prayer. I hope you understand. God's got your back. He loves you, young man. And once again, it was written by my friend David Tillery. And it's a powerful poem. And, that's the foreword right there that we just covered. So the next chapter is called Testimony. And ultimately, there's 10 chapters, all of them. Foreword, testimony, prison, captured, not conquered, change, mature living versus childish understandings, what's real, respect, whose life are we living, freedom, and my last week in prison. So we read the foreword. Now we're going to jump into the testimony. And this starts out with saying testimony. A simple definition of testimony reads as something that someone says, especially in a court of law, while formally promising to tell the truth. Proof or evidence that something exists or is true. And it goes on to say the philosophical centerpiece has always been the maxiom, the unexamined life is not worth living. Let me rewind that for y'all. Make sure y'all heard that. The philosophical centerpiece has always been the maximum, the unexamined life is not worth living. The unexamined life, the life that just keeps going and never stops and never has it questioned. You know, as we were talking in the forward about someone having time to really go inside and thin slice and look at things, like no one really has no time like that. But examining your life is doing just that, being able to go inside and look at and thin slice. And, you know, it takes time and it takes, you know, a want and desire. And unfortunately, we always got to hit the pitfalls, like go to prison, to really get to a place that we want to examine our life. But it shouldn't have to come down to that. A subtle but yet deep thought with many dimensions of depth when fully grasped. The bottom line seems to be the ultimate question for every human is, how should one live one's life? A basic requirement for anyone who doesn't want to go through life with blinders on. But when we examine life, what do we find? The truth isn't always so pretty and inviting. The truth we find usually is ugly and repelling. When we look at our truths of gangsterism, which flood our streets and penitentiaries worldwide with mature civil eyes, we think right away, what madness, what insanity. But through the eyes of an impressionable young man or a man-child, he sees this madness as glamorous, attractive, and as a vehicle to make his transformation from boyhood into manhood. With the rituals like quote sessions, initiations, putting in work, and the status gained by how much you have and the rep that your name begins to be associated with, such as rider, go-getter, player, etc. This only strengthens the distorted belief that one has successfully crossed over into manhood. This poor man's bravado gets made up in a respect from one's peers, which then translates into a sense of self-entitlement with short-lived highs in forms of cars, women, temporary riches, fake handshakes, clout, all those type of things. The reality of the facts of the matter seem to elude one until he's trapped in a concrete confinement and forced by the grace of God to awake and see the totality in pure clarity. And this is a piece of the Bible. It comes out of the book of Psalms, and it's 68:6, and it says, God settles the solitary in a home. He leads out the prisoners to prosperity, but the rebellious dwell in a parched land. Now hear that again. The rebellious dwell in a parched land, but God settles the solitary in a home. He leads out of the prisoners to prosperity. So he's leading the prisoners to prosperity, but people who are rebellious, they dwell in a parched land. And what do you do when you're parched? You're without, right? So, you know, the Bible always talks a lot about people being incarcerated, prison. Everybody in the Bible is doing some, you know, some wicked things, and God still shows, you know, the unconditional love through transformation, right? And that's why a lot of this book has quotes from the Bible, because at the end of the day, we're all prisoners. We're prisoners to ourselves. We're prisoners to our habits. We're prisoners to our flaws. We're prisoners to our thinking, you know, and nobody can break us free but God and ourselves. And God will give us the information and the knowledge, but it's on us to take that information and apply it in our lives. And, you know, the question I purpose to the world of the young men out there and myself alike is, why does one have to go so deep into that dark forest to finally see? You feel me? Usually you go into the dark forest, right? And then you come back out and you turn the hero. But ultimately, sometimes we really don't need to go into that dark forest and go so deep up in there in order to come back the hero. Like, all the pieces and the wisdom and the knowledge is there. And especially for young cats, man, I wish I had a YouTube or something like this back when I was younger. I'd have been 20 steps ahead of the game if I had something like this that could be a pipeline of information and constantly feed me. But, you know, back to the book, finally to awake that he's been played as a pawn by sticking to the G code In a game that has no true winners, just complete losers, waiting to go to the feds, only only to live out the rest of their days among the walking dead. You know, that's the highest you go in the game is you go fed. You go to the feds. You don't, you can go state prison, feds or state or whatever. Those are the walking dead. You're gonna be walking with the living dead because people are alive. They walking, they doing all the things you're doing, but they dead. They ain't never going outside those walls. They're gonna come out in a stretcher. They're gonna die in old age or murdered at the hands of somebody in there because a lot of people are doing life, got hundreds of years. They the walking dead. Why, I ask, does not the facts alone deter his mother's guidance? These questions I have wrestled with in the tranquility of my cell after year while sitting in a maximum or medium facility for 11 years, only before I was granted the blessing of a second chance. A second chance that would be a rebirth with illumination on these subject matters and a calling to give my contribution intuitively spoken. So for me to get back out is a second chance at life because ultimately the time I could have got could have been a life sentence. I could have killed myself in the process of trying to kill another man because even though I might have gunned him down, I'd have been doing life in a penitentiary. I'd have been the walking dead. And, getting back out is a second chance. It's like a rebirth. And it's a rebirth because I came from that penitentiary. I came from that dark forest and I left with the light and came back out here. And don't get me wrong, like I've been out for 7 years, 8 years now, and my light is probably a little dimmer now because I got the ways of the world on me. I'm wrestling with the world, and I've got some hate in my heart that I didn't have while I was incarcerated. But, the illumination came to me while I was in there by reading, by, conversing with other people that were in there of older people and, just weighing thought against thought. And I think truth needs no interpreter, right? Because once you see the truth or hear the truth, it's hard to beat it. The truth needs no interpreter. But that's what the book goes to say. It says, a second chance that would be a rebirth with an illumination on these subject matters that we're going to cover in this book, and a calling. Yeah, I've always felt called. That's why I make these videos. That's why I jump in front of the camera. That's why I'll be on social media at all, because I gotta feel like I got a calling for young men and for people that's been incarcerated to help reform them and change their lives and see that shit. We don't need to be taking these risks, and everything starts with the mind. If you can be the voice of reason in your own mind and control your own mind, you go a long ways, because a lot of times we don't even realize that we control our own thoughts, and we got to put those thoughts in our minds strategically that are going to empower us and move us forward. But I've got a calling to give my contribution intuitively spoken, and it was spoken to me while I was in there. That's why I wrote these books. I felt pulled to write these essays. I felt pulled to compile this as a book, and I felt pulled to get in front of this camera and bring this to y'all. So next page we on, and it says, I speak from the heart with firsthand experience on the topics that be. I, Tim Jacobs, being the man-child at one point in time that I speak of in my evolution into becoming the purpose-driven man of integrity that I am today. As a boy, I learned aggression merited for manhood. I initiated many moral pollutants, and by doing so, I absorbed a distorted sense of self-preservation, and after being stabbed 9 times, the distortion only magnified. So when I was about 16, 17, some people try to jump me and try to get my car at a car wash. While going through that process right there, fighting them off, they stuck me 9 times. They collapsed my lung and they punctured my diaphragm. And after going through that whole process of being in the emergency room and almost dying, when I got stabbed, they had pushed me into the hospital, and I remember they were cutting open my clothes with the scissors while I was on the gurney, and I had blacked out before I got in there, but I was coming to while I was on that gurney, and they were cutting my clothes off, and there was a preacher standing over me with the Bible open reading, and I didn't know nothing about no Bible then, wasn't even thinking about no Bible, and he was reading out the Bible and praying over me, and I was slipping in and out of consciousness, and I woke up and I had a tube in my lung, And, I was in a dark room at the corner, and it was late at night, had a tube in my lung. I got a zipper right here, it staples up and down, and ultimately, that was close to going to death. I was almost killed me right there. And what I was saying by saying, once again, as a boy, I learned aggression merited for manhood. I initiated many moral, ethical pollutants, and by doing so, I absorbed a distorted sense of self-preservation. And after being stabbed 9 times, the distortion was only magnified. By the distortion only being magnified, now after I got stabbed 9 times, to me, I wasn't going nowhere without no pistol. I was going to keep a strap on me, and it was going to be life or death next time. You know what I mean? And that's where I felt like I was slipping. But the streets that have you feeling like that because you go through situations like that. I mean, and keep in mind, I'm a young man at the time, and I'm living like I'm an adult. 16, 17, and that's why I was saying the distortion was only magnified. In this mixed up world, everything was twisted. The good was bad and the bad was good, and still kind of is at the world at large. And in my mixed up world, everything was twisted. Sin was my morality. An immature perspective served as my wisdom, and war represented peace in this mixed up world that I was in. And this mixed up world that I speak of, many of us are still living in this thing still to this day. Like, this is what we listen to in our music. This is what we live in our neighborhoods, and ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a distorted reality of what's really supposed to be good and what's bad. And I'll let y'all play with that thought. But my path was a path of pure ignorance. As I followed it, it sure enough led to derailment from life as I knew it. Arrested for 2 unrelated charges of attempted murder and first-degree assault, I started the chapter of life at 20 years of age on lockdown, out of sight, out of mind. As my senses became sober and the months became colder, the truth about the life I lived and the character I was becoming behind the culture I learned in the streets started tugging on me. I could only listen for so long before I willingly indulge in something to distract myself from myself, like sitting in those cells, not having no TV or no distractions or no phones. Like, you've got to come to the realization, like, I don't know, it just has a way of coming to yourself. And on the street smoking weed and drinking, like they used to call smoking weed being stoned, but you stone cold to the facts that be. And that's, my heart was cold. My heart was very cold, especially coming from the streets and going in there. So I would distract myself with TV or reading a book or getting up and going out and talking to somebody to distract myself from myself. Such things as cards and dominoes and aimless TV. As time went on, my trial drew nearer, and since I was caught with the gun in hand, in order to escape a life of incarceration by unanimous guilty, I had to take a deal. And that final deal that was offered to me was 18 to 25 years in the Colorado Department of Corrections. At the green age of 21, I was sentenced to 22 years in CDOC, which is the Colorado Department of Corrections. As I was escorted back to my holding cell, I watched tears stream down my mother's face as she waved in love, a goodbye that would signify hurt, pain, and shame. The friends, the homies, I dedicated so much time with doing this and doing that, shedding blood, sweat, and tears on the streets of Denver, were nowhere to be found. All with different excuses why they couldn't be there, when they'd be there. But the ones who I trampled over in my day-to-day ignorance, there they were, front and center. And that was my mom. My mom, for a long time, it gave me the game. She had told me, go to school, you enjoy this, let's get you enrolled in that. I didn't want to hear none of that. I didn't want to do none of that. I seen fast money. When I was coming up, I'm looking up to older cats that look cool to me. They got the cars, they looking like they got the money, and, I'll tell y'all a story about that another video. But, ultimately, I got a distorted idea of what really success was and what life is really about. And, my mother passed not this August, but last year she passed away. And, it hurts deep inside to think that that ignorance cost me and cost her so much, not only time apart from one another, which is priceless, but it messed up our family. It put distance in between a lot, and that's thanks to me. That's the realization I got to come to. And fuck, what can I do now other than constantly try to be better at who I am as a person? Hence my growth and development to a degree by being incarcerated for them 11 and a half years. But the day ones, the ones that I trampled over in my day-to-day ignorance, there they were, front center. She was there waving, loving you, crying, sad. You know what I mean? That's probably one of the worst pains that she could ever have right there. Couldn't even imagine that, being a mother, seeing your son that you done birthed, seeing him peer, seeing his fate being 22 years in the Colorado Department of Corrections. So back to the book, though, it says, again, questions continue to swirl in my head. This time, silence is the only answer. From 2003 to 2014, while I lived as an inmate/offender in the Department of Corrections, I embarked on a transformational path of redemption, and I immersed myself in education, soul searching, conversations that were edifying, spiritual cultivation, and that was the only way to transcend my inner ignorance. And ultimately, this was a routine that I had set up daily, and I had to be militant on it. Conversations that I was having and the whole nine. Subsequently, this redeeming process for me symbolized the end of a bad beginning and a new start. Through the disciplines of consistent willpower, knowledge, dedication, and spirituality, I feel like I've finally really removed a huge part of the pollutants that plagued my mind. Finding that fork in the road and taking the path less traveled, light was shed on many areas of my life that I was in the dark about. I became a student of sociology, psychology, owning to my own keen observations of others. You can learn a lot from people you don't want to be like, and being in prison, you can look around and see a whole lot of people you don't want to be like, and it's a good learning tool, building block of what you don't need to do and what you should do, and vice versa. Prison won't show you who you want to be, but it will definitely show you who you don't want to be. I transformed what was designed to be a cage into a hidden university, a study/laboratory, the way thought against thought. My cell became my own secluded place of challenge that would mold an organically made, educated man. By studying, I found solace in black and white. Page by page of reading all these books, I increased my familiarity with culture, mind, and others around the world, as well as politics, religion, criminal law, and the world at large. Not to mention the intermissions that allowed me to get in touch with myself. And there's nothing like reading a good book and being able to, lay on your bunk and just kind of think about what you just took in. And, like I said, I'd read books and pieces of light would come to me. And, those pieces of light, when I lay down and think, things would start coming together. So that's the intermissions that I speak of right there. But the book goes on to say, let me make one thing clear. Prison is no friend of mine at all and never will be. Its objective is to torment my body and my mind with years of isolation, damage being inflicted to my spirit with constant distractions, violence, and dehumanizing practices, along with sensory deprivation and many other injustices. I'm not immune to the chaos of prison, even with a decade of time under my belt, but I've been able to confront and counter it by my redemption. My redemption is a continual process of change that promotes day-to-day improvement in my life. No one has been able to give me redemption, nor intercede on my behalf, not at all. I've had to wake up early and work hard, day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year. in order to earn it myself. I had to swim in the gutter among the dead, but praise be to God, I was blessed with the fortitude to step out of that filth and wash off and walk among the living for a second round. And that's major. Got to think about that. I could come back out into this world and I could have been dirtier than ever. Usually what you hear about people going in there and doing time, especially big bigs like me, what do? They come out worse than they went in. But now I'm tired of that story and I don't never want to hear that narrative. I don't go for that. You know what I mean? I'm strong-minded and I'm strong-spirited. Praise God. My testimony is an everyday reality for many young, misguided, lied to, underprivileged adolescents across the globe. The only difference is I woke up and others still have yet to do so. So, in retrospection, I thin sliced my life asking why. Why did it take something so drastic to clear the fog of ignorance and lies that I based my life on? My young life at that. How did I buy into such a clear, deceptive path, a path to my own destruction? How and why? What would make me put my life on the line for a street in California I never set foot upon? And this is because when I was younger, I calling myself being a gangster, claiming a hood out of Cali, but I'm willing to die for this, put my life on the line, but I ain't never even been to this block. I don't even know if I go to this block if they even gonna receive me. And me being Caucasian, man, that's another ball game right there, and we can pick that up on another channel. So, these are questions I'm asking myself in my mind. Upon much deep meditation upon these subjects, I have been able to bracket out the different areas I feel need more light in order to cultivate a more critical thinking, productive young man that aspires for more out of his life than tattoos and prison bars. I know that if I had someone whom I respected that would have sat me down and who would have been able to aid and assist to help in building these understandings that I now have, that I would be so much further off in life than I am right now, and I'd be forever indebted. That is who I hope to be for those who feel in themselves that they can do so much better than their current situation. With my protocol applied and built upon, I am confident men and women, both young and old, will create a global consciousness that will give a clear picture to who they are, their social obligations, as members of one divine team that will trump any man-made ego or separate. When you're in the streets, you feel like there's big I's and little U's. And these is coming from a man-made ego right here. But ultimately, we all God's children at the end of the day, and there's no escaping that because we all got one destination. We gonna die at some point. So really, we one divine team, but we definitely ain't moving like that and ain't working like that. But that would have been the first chapter right there. So now we're going to jump into the second chapter, and this chapter is called Prison. Capture, not conquer.